The crack of the bat echoed like a gunshot through the humid Ohio night, shattering the fragile peace I'd built around my secrets. As the ball soared into the stars above the Cleveland Stadium, much like the wild, uncharted path my heart was about to take, I was Nicholas Hale, 22 and adrift in the vast, unforgiving sprawl of Middle America, clutching a lukewarm beer in the stands beside my best friend, Tommy, whose laughter boomed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. But it was Tommy's father, Harlan Whitaker, sitting one row back with that steady gaze fixed not on the field but on me, who ignited the spark, his quiet nod of invitation earlier that evening, now feeling like the first crack in the dam, holding back a flood of truths neither of us could ignore. That nod had come casually enough, over a backyard grill in their modest ranch house on the outskirts of Akron, where the air smelled of charred burgers and fresh-cut grass, the kind of scent that screamed normalcy in a world that had never felt normal to me. Tommy, my roommate since freshman year at Kent State, had slapped my back and said, "Dad's got season tickets to the Guardians, want to tag along? It's Indians versus Yankees. Gonna be epic." I'd nodded, forcing a grin, because saying no would have meant another night alone in our cramped apartment, scrolling through endless feeds of lives that looked whole while mine felt like a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Harlan had just watched me then, his hazel eyes crinkling at the corners under the brim of his faded cap, as if he saw the hesitation I buried under layers of easy banter. "Plenty of room, Nick," he'd rumbled, his voice like gravel smoothed by years of factory shifts at the tire plant. "Be good to have you." Simple words, but they landed heavy, stirring something deep in my chest, a warmth I hadn't felt since the day I realized boys, not girls, made my pulse race in ways I couldn't explain to anyone, least of all myself. The stadium lights buzzed overhead like distant fireflies as we settled into our seats, the roar of the crowd a living thing that pressed against my skin. Tommy dove into stats, rattling off batting averages with the fervor of someone who'd grown up with baseball as religion, his lanky frame echoing his father's but softer, unscared, leaning forward in excitement. I nodded along, half listening, my eyes drifting to Harlan 2 rows behind. At 48, he carried the weight of a life etched in calluses and quiet regrets, broad shoulders from decades hauling rubber vats, hands that spoke of a marriage long faded into polite cohabitation with Tommy's mom, Ellen, who'd stayed home tonight citing a headache. He wasn't the type to complain. Instead, he nursed his beer and offered gruff commentary that cut through the noise like a lighthouse beam. "Watch Ramirez," he said to no one in particular, but his eyes met mine over Tommy's head. "Kid's got heart. Reminds me of you. Nick Scrappy. Doesn't back down." My throat tightened at that, heat rising unbidden to my face. Scrappy. That's what they called it in small-town Ohio, where tough it out was the unspoken creed for guys like maisons of auto workers and diner waitresses, raised on the belief that feelings were luxuries you couldn't afford. I'd come out to Tommy last year, in a fumbling rush after one too many shots at a frat party, expecting rejection but getting a bear hug and a "dude, you're still my brother." It had freed something, but not everything. The world beyond our bubble was sharper, sidelong glances at the plant where I'd interned last summer, whispers in the dorms about that gay kid from the Rust Belt. And Harlan, he'd never said a word about it, just kept inviting me over for dinners that stretched into late-night talks about everything from the Steelers' glory days to the poetry of Whitman stuff Tommy rolled his eyes at, but I devoured like starving manna. As the innings dragged on, the game tightening into a pitcher's duel that had the crowd on edge, I felt Harlan's presence like a gravitational pull. He shifted seats during the 7th-inning stretch, sliding into the empty spot beside me when Tommy wandered off for nachos. Up close, the lines around his eyes told stories of a youth derailed by early fatherhood, a wife who'd grown distant like the receding Lake Erie shoreline, a son he'd pour every ounce of love into without knowing how to voice it. "You play ball in high school?" he asked, his voice low under the swell of Sweet Caroline from the Jumbotron. "A little," I admitted, flexing my fingers against the metal armrest. "Catcher. Kept me out of trouble. Mostly. Lies by omission. It had kept me from thinking too hard about the way the other boys' sweat-slicked uniforms made my stomach twist in forbidden ways." He chuckled, a sound rich and rare, like aged bourbon. "Tommy says you're studying engineering. Smart move. World needs builders, not just dreamers." There was a pause, heavy with the unsaid, as the organ swelled and the crowd sang along. His knee brushed mine in the cramped row, not intentional, but enough to send a jolt through me. Electric and terrifying. I froze, heart hammering louder than the vendor's cries, wondering if he felt it too, that invisible thread pulling taut between us, woven from shared silences and stolen glances. The game ended in a walk-off homer for the Guardians, the stadium erupting in a frenzy of hugs and high-fives that swept us up like a tide. Tommy hooped, pounding my back, but my eyes sought Harlan's in the chaos. He was grinning, genuine and unguarded, clapping slowly as confetti rained down. "Hell of a night," he said, slinging an arm around my shoulders in a gesture that felt paternal yet lingered a beat too long. "Come back to the house. Ellen's got pie." I should have said no. Should have mumbled excuses about an early class. But the pie was a lie we both knew. It was the afterglow, the excuse to extend this fragile bubble where words waited to spill like overfilled rivers. As we piled into his old Ford pickup, the engine rumbling to life under the sodium glow of parking lot lamps, I caught my reflection in the side mirror, eyes wide, cheeks flushed, and wondered if this was the night the dam finally broke. The drive home blurred by in a haze of post-game radio recaps and Tommy's snoring from the back seat, leaving Harlan and me in a cocoon of dashboard light and unspoken tension. He drummed his fingers on the wheel, an old habit from his days tuning engines on the line, and glanced my way. "You okay, kid? Looked like you were a million miles away there in the ninth." Kid. The word stung and soothed in equal measure, a reminder of the chasm between his years, experiences, the straight lines of his life against the crooked path of mine. Just thinking. I hedged, staring at the passing strip malls, their neon signs flickering like faulty synapses, about how some things hit you out of nowhere. Like that homer bam. Game over. Everything changes. He nodded, slow and deliberate, as if weighing my words against his own hidden cargo. "Life's full of those. Nick. You swing. You miss. You get back up. But sometimes the pitch that changes everything isn't the one you see coming." His voice dropped, laced with a vulnerability that mirrored my own. And for a heartbeat, the truck cab felt too small, the air too thick with possibility. We pulled into the driveway just as the first stars pricked the velvet sky, the house a squat beacon of yellow light spilling from the kitchen window. Ellen greeted us with slices of apple pie and decaf, her smile weary but kind, the lines on her face a map of compromises. She pecked Harlan on the cheek, habit more than heat, and retired early, leaving the three of us at the scarred oak table that had witnessed 1,000 such evenings. Tommy demolished his slice in record time, launching into a breakdown of the ump's bad calls. But his energy flagged soon enough, yawns turning to stretches. "I'm crashing," he declared, clapping my shoulder. "You good on the couch, Nick? Dad'll get you blankets." The couch. Neutral territory. Or so I thought. Harlan waved him off with a "get some sleep, son," and busied himself rinsing plates, his back to a broad canvas of flannel stretched taut over muscles honed by necessity, not vanity. I lingered, picking at crumbs. The silence stretching like taffy until it snapped. "Help me with these," he asked, handing me a dish towel, our fingers brushing in the soapy water. Electricity again, subtle but insistent, arcing between us like a live wire. We washed in companionable quiet at first, the clink of porcelain a counterpoint to the hum of the fridge. But as the last fork dried, he leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying me with an intensity that peeled back my defenses layer by layer. "Tommy tells me you've been seeing someone," he said, casual as the weather. But his eyes betrayed the bluff. Or, not seeing. Past tense. My stomach dropped, fork forgotten in my hand. Tommy hadn't told him that, had he? No. This was Harlan fishing, intuitive as a bloodhound, scenting the loneliness I wore like a second skin. "It didn't work out," I said, voice steadier than I felt. He couldn't handle the real-world stuff. The looks, the questions. Easier to bail. Harlan's jaw tightened. A flicker of anger not at me, but for me. Raw and protective. Worlds full of cowards. Nick. Men who run from what scares and most themselves. He paused, gaze dropping to the floor. Scuffed linoleum bearing witness to years of tiptoeing around truths. "I know a thing or two about that." The words hung there, heavy as the pie's cinnamon scent, inviting confession without demanding it. I wanted to press, to unravel the knot of sorrow in his posture. But fear clamped my tongue. Instead, I murmured a thank you for the night, retreating to the couch where the Afghan smelled of mothballs and faint after Shabbos. I realized with a pang. Sleep evaded me. The ceiling fans were mocking my racing thoughts. Harlan's door clicked shut down the hall, but his presence lingered. A ghost in the walls, whispering of bridges unburned and rivers yet to cross. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, painting the living room in soft golds that did nothing to ease the knot in my gut. Tommy was up first, rummaging for coffee, oblivious to the undercurrents that had swirled like eddies in a stream the night before. Last night was killer. Right. Dad's already talking rematch. He grinned, pouring mugs with the ease of family. But when Harlan emerged hair tousled, shirt untucked, eyes shadowed from a night as restless as mine, the air shifted, charged with the residue of unfinished sentences. Breakfast was eggs and toast. Simple fare that Ellen whipped up with practiced efficiency. Her conversation light on PDA gossip and weather woes. Harlan sat across from me, our knees inches apart under the table, and every scrape of fork on plate amplified the thud of my heart. He caught my eye once, a fleeting smile that said we'll talk later. Or perhaps I'm sorry. I couldn't tell. Tommy chattered on about plans for the weekend, a hike in Cuyahoga Valley. "You in, Nick?" And I nodded mechanically, my mind replaying the brush of fingers, the weight of his gaze. After, as Tommy and Ellen cleared the table, Harlan jerked his head toward the garage. "Need a hand with the truck?" "Been acting up." It wasn't a question, and I followed, the screen door slapping shut behind us like a period on the domestic sentence. The garage was a time capsule, tools hung on pegboards. A half-finished birdhouse on the workbench. The Ford's hood propped open like an invitation to secrets. He handed me a wrench, our hands meeting again, deliberate this time. No. Impossible, and dove into the engine with explanations that washed over me like rain on parched earth. "You ever feel like you're fixing something that's broken beyond parts?" he asked midway through, wiping grease on a rag, his face streaked with it like war paint. The question wasn't about the carburetor. It was a key turning in a lock long rusted shut. "All the time," I whispered, the wrench heavy in my palm. "Like no matter how hard you turn, some pieces just won't fit." He straightened, close enough that I could smell the oil and Old Spice. his breath mingling with mine in the confined space. What if the pieces aren't wrong? What if it's the picture we've been forcing them into? His voice cracked. Just a hair. And in that fracture, I saw a mirror of my own fracture. The hidden bends in a life lived straight for too long. Harlan Whitaker, pillar of the neighborhood, volunteer coach, the man who'd buried his youth under duty, now standing on the precipice of his own unraveling, sparked by a kid half his age who dared to dream aloud. I don't know who moved first, maybe it was mutual, inevitable as gravity, but the wrench clattered to the concrete, and his hand cupped my jaw, thumb tracing the line of my cheekbone with a tenderness that undid me. Our foreheads touched, breaths sinking in ragged harmony, and in that suspended moment, the world narrowed to the pulse at my temple, the warmth of his palm, the unspoken vow that this, whatever this was, would rewrite us both. No kiss. Not yet. Just the promise. Fragile and fierce, blooming in the shadows of a suburban garage where secrets finally found light. The days that followed blurred into a fever dream of stolen moments and mounting dread, each one layering guilt upon longing like sediment in a riverbed. I returned to campus that afternoon, Harlan's parting squeeze on my shoulder burning through my jacket like a brand. His whispered, "Drive safe, Nick," echoing in my ears long after the truck's taillights faded. Tommy dropped me off with a fist bump and a "see you Friday" for the hike, clueless to the seismic shift beneath our friendship's surface. Alone in the apartment, I paced the threadbare carpet, phone clutched like a lifeline I wasn't ready to throw. Text from Harlan, "Thanks for the help." Anytime. Innocent on the surface, but the subtext thrummed, "Come back. Talk. See me." I didn't text back that night, or the next. Instead, I threw myself into lectures on thermodynamics, equations that promised order in a universe bent on chaos. But equations lied. They couldn't quantify the ache that settled in my chest, a hollow throb that swelled at the thought of his laugh, rough-hewn and rare, or the way his eyes softened when he thought no one watched. Nicholas Hale, the kid who'd clawed his way out of a trailer park on scholarships and sheer will, now unraveling over a man old enough to be his father, a man with a life stitched together by obligations I could never touch. Friday dawned crisp, leaves turning the valley into a quilt of crimson and gold. Tommy picked me up at dawn, cooler stocked with sandwiches, his playlist blasting Springsteen anthems that spoke of blue-collar dreams deferred. "Dad's meeting us at the trailhead," he said, merging onto I-77. "Mom's got bridge club, so it's boys' day out." My stomach twisted, joy laced with terror at the prospect. Harlan, in hiking boots and a wool jacket that accentuated his solid frame, waited by the lot, thermos in hand, waving as we pulled up. "Brought the good stuff," he called, voice steady, but his eyes locked on mine with a heat that made Tommy chuckle obliviously. "Dad's such a dad." The trail wound through ancient oaks, roots snaking like veins over mossy earth, the air sharp with pine and earth. Tommy led, bounding ahead with the energy of youth unburdened, while Harlan and I fell into step, the distance between us a careful 3 feet that felt both safe and suffocating. We talked of safe things at first, the rust in the leaves mirroring the decay in the factories, the way the river below carved canyons over centuries, patient and unrelenting. "Like us," Harlan murmured once, low enough that the wind swallowed it. But I heard, felt it lodge in my ribs like shrapnel. Midway up, at an overlook where the valley sprawled like a crumpled map, Tommy declared a snack break, plopping down to devour a sub while scrolling his phone. Harlan and I lingered at the edge. Backs to him, the drop-off a metaphor too on the nose for comfort. "I've been thinking," Harlan started, voice pitched for my ears alone, hands shoved deep in pockets against the chill. "About the other day, in the garage. I didn't mean to overstep. Liar. I breathed, turning to face him, the wind whipping my hair across, eyes suddenly stinging. You meant every second. And so did I. His breath hitched, a sound swallowed by the gusts. And for a moment, we stood there, two men balanced on the knife edge of convention. The valley a silent witness to the chasm we teetered over. Nick. I've never. He trailed off, jaw clenching. The words he couldn't voice painting pictures clearer than any canvas. A life of straight-laced restraint. A marriage of convenience. Desires locked in attics of the soul until a baseball game and a shared pie cracked the key loose. Before I could respond, Tommy's shout shattered the spell. Yo. Lovebirds. Move it. Joking. Harmless. But it landed like a slap, jolting us apart. We hiked on. Laughter forced from my throat. But the seed was planted, roots delving deep into soil long fallow. That night, back in my bed, I dreamed of falls not fatal, but freeing, leaping hand in hand into the unknown. Harlan's grip, the only anchor in the void. Weeks turned the calendar's pages with merciless speed. Autumn yielding to winter's bite as Thanksgiving loomed like a family obligation wrapped in tinsel. Invitations piled up from a distant aunt in Toledo. Harlan's the annual Whitaker feast with aunts, uncles, and cousins who'd known him since diaper days. But the subtext hummed, "Stay. Join us." Tommy echoed it unwittingly. "Dad says you're family. Man. No excuses." So I went, steeling myself against the domestic tableau that threatened to expose the fault lines beneath. The house swelled with the clamor of kin, Ellen's turkey golden and steaming, aunts clucking over potato salad, uncles debating election polls with the fervor of gladiators. Harlan moved through it like a ghost in his own home, carving meat with mechanical precision, his smiles polite masks that slipped when our eyes met across the chaos. Once, passing the gravy, our fingers tangled to accident. Known the room narrowed to that point of contact. Electric amid the din. Later, as plates cleared and football droned on the TV, I slipped out to the back porch for air, the November cold nipping at my knuckles. Harlan followed, 2 beers in hand, settling beside me on the glider with a sigh that carried the weight of lifetimes. This, he gestured vaguely at the muffled laughter inside. It's all I've known. Duty. Routine. But you make me remember what it feels like to want more. My heart stuttered, beer forgotten as I turned to him, the porch light casting shadows that deepened the hollows under his eyes. What do you want? Harlan. Really? The question hung, bold and brittle, a gauntlet thrown into the frost-kissed night. He set his bottle down, hand trembling slightly as it found mine deliberate. Anchoring. You. This. A chance to be honest, even if it breaks everything. His voice broke on the last word, tears glinting unshed. And in that vulnerability, I saw not the father figure, but the man flawed, yearning, every bit as scared as I was. We sat like that until the cold drove us in, hands parting reluctantly, the secret sealed in shared warmth. But secrets fester. By Christmas, the strain showed in cracked smiles and averted gazes. Tommy noticed first, cornering me after a tense dinner where Harlan's knife had slipped, nicking his thumb. "What's up with you and Dad?" He's been weird distracted, like he's carrying the world. I deflected with a laugh, but guilt gnawed like termites in beams. Just stress. Plant layoffs coming. Lies. All of it. But necessary armor in a house built on them. Harlan and I navigated minefields, a brush in the hallway, a loaded glance over eggnog, each one fanning embers into flames we dared not name. New Year's Eve brought the breaking point. Tommy threw a bash at our apartment, balloons and bass thumping into the witching hour. Harlan showed, uninvited but inevitable, claiming to check on his boy, amid the revelry. As confetti fell and toast rang out, he pulled me aside into the dim kitchen. The party's roar a distant surf. "I can't do this halfway, Nick," he said, voice raw over the clink of bottles. "Ellen suspects. Tommy will. Soon. We end it. Or we fight for it." The choice loomed. A fork in the road slick with ice. "Fight," I whispered, pulling him close in the shadows. Our embrace a dam against the flood. But as midnight struck and cheers erupted, a knock at the door heralded Ellen, face pale, eyes knowing. "We need to talk," she said, not to Harlan, but to us both. The music died, the room tilting, and in that unraveling, our hidden world collided with the one we'd tried to outrun. The fallout cascaded like dominoes in slow motion. Ellen's quiet confrontation in our kitchen slicing through the festive haze with surgical precision. She didn't scream no histrionics for a woman who'd long ago traded passion for pragmatism, but her voice, steady as the Ohio River, carried the weight of 25 years unspoken. "I've seen the looks, Harlan. The way you light up around him. And you, Nicholas, Tommy adores you. But this hurts us all." Her eyes, red-rimmed but dry, flicked between us, not with hate, but a weary sorrow that pierced deeper than rage. Tommy burst in then, champagne flute in hand, confusion etching his boyish features. "Mom, what's going on?" The truth spilled in fragments, halting confessions from Harlan about desires dormant since youth. My own admission of love born in stadium lights and garage confessions. Tommy's face cycled through shock, betrayal, fury. "My best friend. My dad. How long?" His voice cracked, fists clenched, storming out into the night without a coat, the door slamming like a guillotine. Ellen stayed, folding into a chair with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed this collapse. "We've been roommates more than lovers for a decade," she confessed to me, hand on Harlan's arm in a gesture more sibling than spouse. "But family, that's not disposable." Harlan knelt before her, apologies tumbling like prayers. And in the wreckage, a pact formed, counseling, space, honesty as the new foundation. She nodded, exhausted but resolute. "Fix it, or let it go. But don't drag our son through the mud." I left at dawn, the city streets slick with melting snow. Harlan's text a lifeline, "Give him time. I'm here." Days blurred into a limbo of unanswered calls from Tommy. My classes a blur of rote notes and hollow eyes. Harlan and I met in stolen hours coffee shops on the edge of town. Walks in anonymous parks, each meeting a thread weaving us tighter even as the world frayed. I came out to her fully last night. He told me one gray afternoon. Bench overlooking the Cuyahoga's toxic legacy. Now cleaned but scarred. Said I'm Bileways new, but buried it under duty. She cried, but understood. More than I deserve. And Tommy? The question lodged like a stone. Our rift a wound suppurating. He'll come around. Or he won't. But I can't live half a life anymore. Nick. Not with you. His hand found mine under the bench. Hidden but firm. And in that grip, I glimpsed the man emerging stronger. Unapologetic. The Harlan who'd swing for fences instead of bunting safe. Spring thawed the ground, but not our impasse. Tommy's silence stretched to weeks. Broken only by a curt email, "Need space. Don't call." It gutted me. The betrayal in black and white. But Harlan urged patience. His own journey a mirror. I lost friends when I told my brother thought he'd disown me. But blood's thicker than fear. Sometimes. We built slowly. Therapy sessions where I unpacked the shame of a Rust Belt boy loving against the grain. Harlan confronting the toxic masculinity that had caged him. Ellen joined once. Her presence a bridge. sharing stories of her own quiet rebellion's college fling with a woman, abandoned for stability. The turning point came in April. Under blooming dogwoods in the valley we'd hiked that fateful fall. Tommy texted, "Meet me." Alone. Heart pounding. I drove to our overlook. Finding him there thinner. Shadows under his eyes. But standing tall. "I hate this." He started. Voice thick. "Hate that it changes everything. But Dad's happier." Glowing. Like I haven't seen since Mom left for that cruise and didn't come back mad. He punched my arm. Half-hearted. "You're still an idiot for falling for him. But your family. Just warn a guy next time." Relief crashed over me like a wave. Tears mingling with laughter as we hugged it out. The valley echoing our raw joy. Harlan waited at home. And when I burst through the door with news, he pulled me into an embrace unshadowed by secrecy fierce. Open. The kind that promised tomorrows. Ellen watched from the kitchen, smiling faintly. "About time," she said, raising a glass of iced tea and toast. Summer unfurled in verdant promise. Our lives reknitting with deliberate care. Harlan and I navigated the public dance hand holding in quiet cafes. Kisses stolen in the truck's cab, but the real work was internal, me. Shedding the fear of judgment that had hobbled my steps. Him. Embracing a queerness long denied. Joining a local support group where graying men swapped stories of late-blooming authenticity. Tommy thawed fully, teasing us over barbecues. His acceptance a balm that healed old fissures. Yet trials lingered. Subtle barbs from neighbors who whispered midlife crisis over fences. A co-worker's cold shoulder at Harlan's plant. We weathered them together. Our bond a forged tempering resolve. One evening, as fireflies danced in the backyard, Harlan proposed not rings, but commitment. Marry me. Not legally yet, but in every way that counts. Build this life. Nick. With me. Tears pricked as I said yes. Our foreheads touching under the stars. The same gesture that had started it all now sealing an end to hiding. In the years that followed, we did adopting a rescue dog named Slugger, who bounded through our days with joyful abandon. Harlan retiring to teach woodworking at the community center, his hands shaping futures as they'd shaped mine. Me graduating, landing a job in sustainable design, channeling Rust Belt grit into green rebirths. Looking back from our porch swing a decade on, gray threading my hair as it had Harlan's once. I see the hook that reeled us in, that baseball crack. Not an end, but a beginning. We changed not just each other, but the worlds within, proving that love, in all its bent and beautiful forms, doesn't shatter lives, but rebuilds them, stronger against the storms. And in the quiet nights, with his head on my shoulder and the game on low, I know some invitations aren't to watch, but to play to swing for the fences, heart wide open, and catch whatever comes.